Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goddard. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. There is no doubt that we live in unsettled times today. The world is at a tipping point. The U.S. financial crisis appears deeper than most anticipated. Just a week ago, the U.S. government approved an unprecedented bailout worth $700 billion for a large section of its financial services industry. But despite the obvious concern and commitment showed by the U.S. Congress, the markets barely reacted. The setbacks from the global shocks of the past year and the past weeks are real and profound. It will take time and perseverance to put the pieces back together. Against this backdrop, the Philippines is in relatively good shape. Thanks to our fiscal reforms that manifested in the more than 7% GDP growth last year. The potential exposure of our banks to the asset inflation triggered by subprime mortgage losses account for less than 1% of total system assets. This exposure is fully reserved. Our banks are well capitalized, and the innate conservatism of our bankers is matched by the prudential foresight of our regulators. Our central bank governor, who is independent of the Philippine government, is in Washington together with our Secretary of Finance and Budget and our planning secretary for the IMF World Bank meeting. But we have with us our Secretary of Trade and Industry, who is the national government's representative to the Monetary Board. We are proving the value of a new paradigm for self-reliance through the use of, first, a targeted strategy with a set of precise prescriptions to ease the price challenges we are facing. Second, rice self-sufficiency and more energy independence. And third, long-term reforms. To ease our price challenges, since the volatile global economic situation became apparent many months ago, we have increased and stabilized the supply of rice. We have delivered targeted subsidies to the poor. We have reached out to our neighbors in the Mekong region to ensure a stable supply. We've clamped down on price gouging and corruption in the rice trade and invested more and more billions in planting and agricultural modernization. The central bank, through all this period, in several tranches, increased the rate basis points by 100 basis points. And this is an example of what our economic team has been doing to work tirelessly on all fronts to manage inflationary pressures, provide a safety net to those members of our society who are hit hardest by these global developments, and deliver the economic growth that will continue to generate jobs and the tax revenues that are fueling the investment in our future, including the infrastructure that can visibly be seen and that was referred to by Mr. Goddard. I am pleased at the downturn in the consumer price growth last month. While no one can predict the future during these uncertain global times, it seems that our measures at home are seeing us through the toughest times. We hope the worst is behind us in the Philippines and that we have weathered the worst of the global storm. On rice self-sufficiency, from the day we took office, we have been focused on modernizing our economy, modernizing every aspect of the economic underpinnings of the economy. This includes agriculture, from development of new hybrids to unprecedented investments in irrigation to dramatic increases in loans to help our farmers, among other activities. But while we have achieved a high productivity of rice per hectare, nature did not gift us with a mighty Mekong and a vast and naturally fertile plain. Nature instead, as we can see today from the rain, put our islands ahead of our neighbors in the path of typhoons from the Pacific. Therefore, it had been more economical to import 10% of the rice that we consume rather than produce that 10% on marginal lands. But with what happened this year, with the rise in global prices notwithstanding our preparation, we reached a consensus with the legislature, and I'm glad that we have two members of the legislature here with us, Congressman Pentabella and Congressman Mercado, and with the business community, and I'm glad we have members of the business community here with us. We reached a consensus altogether that even if the Philippines is a densely populated rocky archipelago with relatively few sources of fresh water, it has become desirable to be self-sufficient in rice. The centerpiece of our drive towards self-sufficiency in rice is a multi-billion package for agricultural modernization that we have nicknamed FIELDS, an acronym that stands for fertilizers, irrigation and farm infrastructure, education and agricultural extension work, loans, dryers and other post-harvest facilities, and seeds, especially hybrid and certified seeds. On energy independence, it's auspicious that we have this meeting today because yesterday, our new Galok oil field started pumping oil to what we believe will be double our crude oil production in our country. This is part of what we have done to increase energy independence during our administration from 41% to 58%, the highest in our history, to the greater use not only of oil exploration, but of geothermal, biofuels, and renewables. And with the Galok oil field starting its production yesterday, we expect to attain 60% energy independence in 2 years. But you will hear more about that this afternoon, I understand, at 4 o'clock p.m. Because as I was coming here in my car, I was talking to our Secretary of Energy, getting the figures correct, and he told me that he is on board to speak before you at 4 o'clock this afternoon. On long-term reforms, I came to office determined to change the strategic paradigm for the Philippine economy. A strong and growing economy has been the central pillar we have labored to create to help guarantee peace, order, and stability. Our gains in the last 7 years were hard-earned. We made tough and sometimes painful reforms to reset our economy. Tax increases, again I thank Congress for helping me do those very painful measures. Banking reforms, that's why our exposure to the subprime crisis is minimal. Crackdown on smugglers, and tough fiscal discipline, to name a few, as part of our anti-corruption efforts. It is paying off. Our economy is more resilient today than ever before. We have created almost 7 million jobs in 7 years. Our international reserves cover 6 months of imports. And the reforms have given us some running room to weather the wave of global price shocks that reverberated across the world this year. It hasn't been easy, but Filipinos are tough and resilient, and that is one of our sources of competitiveness. We have pulled together. We have been able to draw on additional revenues to provide targeted investments in food and fuel to keep our poor afloat until a better day. We are doing everything in our power to focus on the fundamentals, keep the economy steady, and to provide relief for those most in need. In addition, as has been mentioned earlier, we're investing in modernizing infrastructure like roads and bridges, but what makes it different is that it is now on an unprecedented scale because now we can afford it with our tax reforms. Incidentally, our Secretary of Education was the chairman of the House Committee on Ways and Means that led us through these tax reforms. We are also investing in expanded education, healthcare, and other social services. ICT is a major element of our education reform program. We expect it to continue taking on an increasingly significant role in improving the access and quality of education to the people.